and I thank you. Thank all of you and each of you for coming and have a distinguished guest.
It's his birthday today.
What a way to celebrate it. A discussion about fastings.
My wife called me from Israel, so.
Okay, so I would first like to say that this whole series of Shiurim has been inspired and dedicated by Lawrence and Judy Turkel. They weren't able to be with us this evening, but this is still very much their shiur, and we just happen to be having it in our house this time. We hope we'll be able to have future shiurim in their home again, but wherever we are, it will be thanks to them and to their credit. And
we're ready for January.
We're ready for January. I would also like to say, Eschatoi ani mazkir hayom, it is apropos for the Sidra, I need to make a public confession. The last few months I haven't taught any Torah publicly. It's probably good news for the Torah, but bad news for me because I had a very busy semester in school, etc. If God gives me the strength, I will never, ever do that again, no matter how busy I am, because I feel like the fish that Rabbi Akiva spoke to, who thinks he's in better shape when he goes out of the water. This fish belongs in the water, and so as long as God gives me strength, no matter how busy I am, I hope that we will be able to meet as regularly as you will tolerate me. That we will meet and we will learn Torah together. And we already have scheduled. There's the next 2 shiurim, which will finish off our series on the judges. There will be more shiurim with God's help in this series, which is intended to come to the different celebrations, the feasts and fasts of the Jewish year through the lens of the Talmudic tradition. And I give you all a lot of credit because I am told that these shiurim are not quite as entertaining and easily accessible as the shiurim on narrative. I'll do my best to make it accessible, but it does involve a certain amount of text work in the Talmud, and I will at no moment will I ever shift into jargon such that it becomes inaccessible, but it also requires a certain amount of investment on everybody's part just to stay with the game. Now, today's discussion will move over the following points. And by the way, just a note about the rules. The reason for putting food on the learning table is so that people will eat while they learn. I find that it tends to help people stay focused and awake. That's why, did you ever notice on the Israeli buses, the Yemenite ladies with the bags of fruit? Someone told them when they made Aliyah on the magic carpet that Israeli buses run on fruit. And that if for 1 minute you stop eating, the entire Egged system will close down. So they very charitably bring giant bags of plums and figs and grapes, and they just work so hard. You can imagine what that is on a 5-hour trip, right? With buses with no bathrooms. And so I figure eating keeps things going. So that's why there's little nibbles on the table. Please do not be shy. If I see people eating, I assume that they're also learning. So you have and those of you who are in the bleachers, you even get travel passes to come up, load up your napkins, throw it over your shoulder like a knapsack, and you're running away from home, and then just come and stay with us. Tonight. Now, tonight's discussion will move over the following areas. First, I would like to give you some of the very interesting history of what we call the minor fasts of the Jewish calendar, right? We all know what the minor fasts are. Generally, the big list is Tzom Gedalia and Shivasar B'Tammuz,
It's not a minor fast.
Well, it's minor, the truth is,
Even though
there
it
are no
lasts a
minor
long
fasts
time.
and there are no minor prophets. Everything is relative. Relative to well, let's first ask ourselves, when we describe a minor fast, Asara Btevet, Tzom Gedalia, what about them makes them minor? Why are they called minor?
Because they're not in the Torah?
We'll come to that, but certain things, Tisha B'Av isn't in the Torah either, and it's not considered minor. Yes, Susan?
I'm saying that it starts in the morning,
Okay, good.
Right,
okay? It's not a full day affair.
It's not a full
25
day,
hours.
good,
25
and,
hours, yeah.
and what else?
That sounds good.
Is there anyone here who feels obliged to wear tennis shoes on Asara Btevet?
No.
Well,
By the way, I
don't
would
answer
never.
too fast, because at one time it would seem that there were people who did observe these minor fasts in what we might call a more major fashion. However, their history is fascinating, and it is not so simple that they are minor. So what I hope to send you home with this evening is a concept of how these fasts in Jewish history developed, and then a little bit of specialized work on the one which is before us next Thursday. A week from tomorrow is Asara Btevet, and Asara Btevet has a unique halachic profile, things about it that most people don't know or don't think about, and so we'll send you home with some Asara Btevet goodies also. People will be able to tell in Riverdale who was at our Shiur, because they will be the people walking around on Asara Btevet, smiling smugly like those who know the inside story, while the rest of the world blunders in its darkness. Yes, Susan?
Would Ta'anit Esther also belong to that category? It starts in the morning.
It is
And you don't
also
need
considered a
tennis shoes.
minor fast,
Yeah.
but it is even more minor than the other minors.
Oh, yeah?
But it goes on the list. It resembles the others, but you will soon see why its rank is a little bit lower in terms of its origins and the references to it. So for this discussion, we are going to take ourselves to the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, and that is where we're going to begin. And I'm sorry about the smallness of the print, and I will try. The entire Mishnah and Talmud began as what was called Torah Sheba'al Peh, which means the oral Torah. My job, none of you are old enough to remember listening to baseball games on the radio. But only Stanley and I, the genius of games on the radio was that one was able to see it through the description of the announcer. And I have always had a great veneration for those announcers who could place it before your eyes, even though all you were hearing was their description. So,
Going, gone.
yeah, that's it. In case the print or the language is daunting, just consider me Red Baba, and I will try and I will do the play-by-play on the Gemara and try to make it accessible to you. So the Gemara begins with an interesting Mishnah in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, and the Mishnah says, Al Shisha Chodoshim Shaluchim Yotzi. You know that the beginning of the month, of the Hebrew month, was a little bit dicey. It depended on when the witnesses, or if the witnesses came to the temple having seen the new moon, right? So you knew the first day of the new month would either be the 30th day after the last month began, or the 31st, so it could go either way. Now, if you are living someplace like Babylonia, and you have to know, for example, what day is Pesach, you have to know when Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of you have to know when the month began, because you know that Pesach is on the 15th. But you only know 15th when you know when the first was. So this was a really key issue. And the court used to send out messengers, they used to send out agents for 3 of the 6 months, for 6 of the 12 months. Al Nisan mipnei Pesach. They had to let people know when they had declared the new month of Nisan because they had to observe Pesach. Al Av mipnei Hatanis. They're going to be very interesting. The month of Av because people had to know when to observe what?
Tisha B'Av.
Tisha B'Av. When was this Mishnah written? When did it have to be written? Was there a temple? After the destruction of the temple. Okay, keep that in mind. Thank you. Al Elul mifnei Rosh Hashanah. The month of Elul was announced because a month later they would know Rosh Hashanah would begin. Rosh Hashanah is a special issue. Al Tishrei mipnei Takonas Hamoados. Tishrei because the fixing of the festivals, the other festivals like Sukkot, etc. Al Kislev mipnei Chanukah. You see that Chanukah already existed. Kislev in order to set the date of Chanukah. Al Adar mipnei Purim. On Adar, the beginning of Adar, so that people would know when Purim was. Ukeshahaya Beis Hamikdash Kayom Yotzim Af Al Iyar mipnei Pesach Sheni. And when there was a temple, you see that the Mishnah was written really in the shadow of the destruction. It wasn't so long afterwards. There were probably people who remembered, or at least who had received the tradition, that there was a 7th month which had messengers, and that was the month of Iyar. Now we think for the month of Iyar is the month when we celebrate the birth date of Israel. But there was no Israel, so what was in Iyar? Iyar was Pesach Sheni. For the people who missed the first celebration of the Passover, 1 month later they got to come to the temple and do an offering. Okay. So the Gemara says, you shall excuse me. The Gemara says, V'lifkoname Tammuz Btevet. The Gemara says, wait a minute, you just told me for Tisha B'Av you could go. So I'm feeling already bad. What about Tammuz, Asara Btevet, also a very religious day? What about Asara Btevet? They couldn't get themselves together to send out a couple of guys to let us know when Rosh Chodesh was on those months. What about those fasts? What is the Gemara really asking? The Gemara is asking from the presumption that if you're willing to send out for Tisha B'Av, what about the stepchildren? Why these fasts? So what do we see? We see that already in the Mishnah, for some reason, in the Mishnah which we have placed when, after the Churban, that already Shivasar B'Tammuz and Asara Btevet, the 17th of Tammuz, which is the day when the temple was, when the walls of Jerusalem were breached, and Asara Btevet, which we'll see was the day when the siege on Jerusalem was begun by the Babylonians. Already they were second-class citizens. How do you know they were second-class citizens? Because nobody bothered to send out emissaries from Jerusalem to make sure that we get them exactly on the right date. So the Gemara wants to know, what's the matter? What's a second-class citizen? So he says, Amar Rav Chana bar Bizna, Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasido. They quote the verse that is the antecedent to the fixing of the important fasts of the Jewish calendar. And actually, I did you a very nice favor, because I'm a wonderful person. If you look down into the next paragraph, you see that it says key verses on the left margin. You see Zechariah. Instead of having to read the verse in the Gemara, like a yeshiva bacher, you can actually read the verse properly. Kiko Amar Hashem Tzivakos, from the book of Zechariah. Tzom ha-revi'i, v'tzom ha-chamishi, v'tzom ha-shevi'i, v'tzom ha-asiri. Yiyeh lebeis Yehudo lesason ulesimcho ulemoadim tovim ve'o'emes ve'hashalom. It says, thus says God. What is he? When's Zechariah talking? Zechariah is saying from the vantage point of those who have suffered the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. Right? Giant catastrophe. The destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. And a whole series of fast days are put in place to commemorate the various stages of that national tragedy. And the prophet Zechariah says, someday, folks, all the days which are now days of grief, days of mourning, fast days, they will become days of soson v'simcha, of rejoicing and gladness. So how did that happen? So first he said, that's the pasuk. He says, Kari luhut tzom, v'kari luhut soson v'simcha. So Rav Acha Bar Bizna's drush is based on this. He says, what do you mean? He says that the very day which is called Tzom HaRevi'i, and we'll see why it's called the fast of the 4th and the fast of the 5th, all that stuff, will be called, the fast will be called rejoicing. So how do you have something which is both a fast and a rejoicing? That's the way that the Gemara's question is elucidated by the Ki Achronim. The problem here is the language. If you say it will become a day, he says no. He says the fast itself will be celebrated with rejoicing. So the Gemara continues. He says, I'll tell you what it's going to be. He says, Kari luhut tzom, the Kari luhut soson v'simcha, calls them both. Bizman sheyesh shalom, when there is real peace, complete peace. Yehiyu l'soson u'l'simcha, then they will be days of rejoicing. Ein shalom, when there is no peace, tzom, then they will be observed as a fast day. Omar Rav Papa came along and further interpreted this. So what did we decided? So far the Gemara is saying that these days will be like with a toggle switch, right? Sometimes they'll be happy, and sometimes they'll be sad. Rav Papa says, let me go into this a little more for you. Let me clarify for you. Hachi komar, this is what it means to say. Bizman sheyesh shalom, yu l'soson l'simcha. When there is peace, then they will be days of rejoicing. Yeshmad, now here he talks, he uses a different language. He doesn't talk about just ein shalom. He says, in times when there is religious persecution, Shemad usually specifically refers to forced conversion, but it means religious persecution. When the Jews are subjected to forced persecution, tzom. But what about ein shmad? The Ein Shalom. What about a time which is, like, fails the Charles Dickens test? It is neither the best of times nor the worst of times. It's just blah. Now, first understand that in the Rishonim it is not so simple. What is the day of Shalom? Some of the Rishonim say that this period, the ideal period when we rejoice, refers to a period when the Jewish people are not subjected to foreign domination. So based upon that, how would you characterize the current period of Jewish history, at least in terms of the land of Israel? It would make the grade as a time of relative peace. Why? Because we live in our land, and we have a certain right of self-determination. I mean, to say that things are not perfect in Israel is really to be blinded to the fact that things for the Jewish people, even with all the difficulties, are so many light years better than they have been in centuries, right? So that, by that standard, would be called shalom. Others, however, have a more specific and more spiritual definition, and they say shalom is only when Beis HaMikdash Kayim. When there is a temple in Jerusalem, that is called shalom, right? The opposite is when there is shemad, in other words, when there is active persecution, which you can imagine really define the period when you have people like Rabbi Akiva who are living through the Hadrianic persecutions, when Hadrian had determined that not only the Jews, but Judaism was his problem. And Jewish observance was under terrible pressure, even in the land of Israel. So this time of this translation into terms of shemad, religious oppression had great resonance for them. And if it's neither, in other words, Jews are more or less coasting, not able to realize their ideal of living in their land with their own Beis HaMikdash, but on the other hand, not under specific persecution, then Papa introduces a whole new thing. Rotsu misanin, rotsu ein misanin. Oh, excuse me. Then at this point, on these designated days, if they want to, they can fast. If they don't want to, they don't have to fast. They become optional. Now, before you begin excited to make your dinner reservations for next Thursday, you should excuse me. Truth is, by dinner you'll be okay, because it's a short day, but I wouldn't meet the ladies for lunch. So, before you get excited about that, understand that there is an entire literature of debate about what do you mean they want to or they don't want to. And this literature ranges from the opinion of the Rambam, who says in Perush HaMishnayos, in his commentary on the Mishnah, that this means that at a certain period at least, it was the privilege of every individual Jew to decide whether you observe these fast days or not. Rotzu, all right, no Rotzu. Others say, such as the Tosfos HaRosh, that it is a question which, in a sense, the entire Jewish people votes on. In other words, if the majority of Jews are fasting, then that is, in other words, the Jewish people have one vote. The majority wins, and whatever the majority says, everyone has to do. And so the assumption is that at some point in history, there was a general consensus of acceptance, and we bear the weight of that. And there is no one today who says that it's up to you, do whatever you want, right? I'm talking about halachic people. There's another opinion which tells us that at a certain point in Jewish history, the Ritva mentions this, this was not a popular vote, but rather this was a vote of the Beit Din. Some people say that local Batei Din decided for their locales. Others say it was a great Beis Din who decided on behalf of the entire Jewish people. And guess what they voted? The caterers' lobby notwithstanding, they voted to fast. Right? Frag die Gemara, a very interesting question. Already in Rav Papa's, when Rav Papa's entertaining the concept of Rotzu, lo Rotzu, you want to, you don't want to, guess what they asked? I think you'd want to know. Tisha B'Av Nami.
Why wasn't it?
So there's no one who says, let's get rid of Tisha B'Av. How come Tisha B'Av was not part of the Rotzu, lo Rotzu equation?
They sent people out.
What?
That was one of the 6 ones that they sent people out for. In the
Yeah.
Mishnah.
So the Mishnah proves that there was no point at which Tisha B'Av was not on the yes list. So Amar Rav Papa says, Shani Tisha B'Av hoil v'huchpelu votzeros. Tisha B'Av was in a class by itself. Why? Because on Tisha B'Av, not only did bad things happen, but bad things happened repeatedly. Now, if you look carefully in the Piyutim and the Slichos for Shivasa B'Tammuz, you will also note that there were traditions that many bad things happened on Shivasa B'Tammuz. Right? Pustumus, maybe the nicest name in all of Jewish literature. Pustumus the Russia. Right? What did he do? He burned the Sefer Torah or something like that. But I really was hoping that, we have some large families in Riverdale, not as many as they have in Crown Heights or something like that. But I was hoping there was some family with like 14 kids that would run out of names. I think it would be nice for one Jewish kid To walk into school, the teacher says, "What's your name?" And he says, "Apostomus." And the teacher says, "Go right to the principal at this minute. We don't talk like that in this school." No one would know the difference. Anyway, but so huchbelu, when the Gemara says huchbelu votzaros, it means the fact that the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash were both destroyed on the same day. The way I understand this Gemara, remember the origins of Tisha B'Av, which is discussed in the Gemara in Tainis, when the spies returned and gave their nasty report, and God says, "You cried for nothing, I will give you something to cry about for the generations." The idea was, Tisha B'Av was not just sad. Tisha B'Av was downright dangerous. Tisha B'Av was a day when Murphy's Law, in exponential terms, worked on behalf of the Jewish people. I could never understand the Israelis. Couldn't they mush around in Gaza and in Sinai, like in the spring or around Hanukkah time? Always the crises, they do them right around Tisha B'Av, and I just go, "Oh, I'm such a wreck," as if we didn't have enough to worry about, right? So huchbelu hatzaros probably means that the people recognized there was a darkness in Tisha B'Av, which was not only retrospective, but which was forever contemporary. And so huchbelu hatzaros means Tisha B'Av was a real and present danger. So no one ever questioned the status of Tisha B'Av. The Amar Mar, the Tisha B'Av Charav Beis Harit Barishona Uvashania V'Nilkada Beitar V'Necho Sha'ir, that on that self same day not only were the two temples destroyed, but the city, the fortress of Beitar was besieged, and the city of Jerusalem, they plowed it with salt to make sure that nothing would ever grow there. So, but let's take out of this what is maybe the most important single artifact, and that is this strange verse from the prophet Zechariah. That verse is going to be interpreted in the coming piece of the Gemara, but what I'd like you to notice about it is what it says. How does it name the various fasts? Right? Kol Hashem Tzavot, Tzom HaRevi'i, the fast of the fourth. Right? Tzom HaChamishi, the fast of the fifth. Tzom HaShavi, the fast of the seventh. Tzom HaAsiri, the fast of the 10th. Fourth, fifth, seventh, 10th, what? Months. So, as the prophet Zechariah, from the vantage point of post-Temple 1, not yet Temple 2, predicting that these days would have a better future, he designates them only in terms of their month. Try writing a check like that. Sometime in December 2017. Right? So, what's odd here is the missing days. And the Gemara is going to discuss the missing days, and Bella knows better than anyone. When rabbis can find something to argue about, they will. So let's look at what happens. Tanya Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, it's very interesting how he reports it. Rabbi Shimon, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Arba Devarim, Hoyo Rabbi Akiva Doresh, Ba'ani Ein Doresh Kamosa. On 4 issues, Rabbi Akiva and I interpreted biblical verses differently. And he doesn't go through all of the discussions because there are other cases, but he gives us one, maybe the most important. Tzom HaRevi'i, everyone agrees, the fast of the 4th month, and of course this means the 4th month counting from when?
Nisan.
What do we count? One? We always start from Nisan. So Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. The fast of the 4th. Zeh Tish'a B'Tammuz Shebo Huvka Ha'ir. That is the fast of, anyone paying attention?
Can you show me where we are?
Yes, oh, I certainly could. Do you see on page 1?
The
Yeah.
second.
You see it in the dark, it says Amud Bet?
Yeah.
Yeah? The second paragraph under Amud Bet.
Second
Oh,
line.
yeah, I got it.
Second paragraph, now I'm on the second line, right?
Yeah.
When he says Soma Revi Zet Tisha B'Tammuz, what day do you fast on?
Shiur Asara.
What day of Tammuz do you fast?
Shiur
17th. What day is he saying it refers to?
The ninth.
The 9th. Did you ever hear the 9th of Tammuz?
No.
You ever hear of Henry the 9th? Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "B'tisha lechodesh, vayechazak hara'av ba'ir v'lo yalechem lam Yisrael b'tiva kahir." That true enough, in the times of Nebuchadnezzar, another name you don't hear often at a bris, at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, I know some people call their son-in-law that. At the time of Nebuchadnezzar, the city was laid siege, and the wall was breached. So indeed, at least according to the Bavli, now just know that in the Yerushalmi there is a tradition that the dates were confused, but that even in the first Beis Hamikdash, the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem happened on the 17th. But here's the pasuk says on the 9th. Now, so I'll ask you a wonderful question. He says the 9th of what month? B'chodesh Haravi. Is there any problem for Zechariah? Has Zechariah committed himself to which day in the month? When he says the fast of the fast of the fast of the? No. He says the fast of the 4th month, the fast of the 5th month, the fast of the 7th month, the fast of the 7th month. That's all he says. He doesn't tell you which day. So according to Zechariah's pasuk, there's no reason that Rabbi Shimon couldn't be right, that it refers to the 9th of Tammuz. Zechariah didn't commit himself. He was really shifting that way. No, he says, we'll pay you back sometime next week. My Korele Revi L'Chodoshin. Why is it called the 4th? Because it is the 4th of the month. Tzoma Chamishi Zet Tisha B'Av, the 5th month. That's Tisha B'Av. Shabo Nisraf Beis Elokeinu. That's when the temple was burned. My Korele Chamishi. So why is it referred to as the fast of the 5th? Chamishi L'Chodoshin, because Av is the 5th month. Tzoma Shavi Zet Shlosha B'Tishrei. That is talking about the 3rd of Tishrei. Shabo Nera Gedalia Ben Achikam. Gedalia. Everybody knows the Tzom Gedalia joke?
Yes.
I think so.
But you can tell them.
If there is even one person, we have an obligation to spread the Tzom Gedalia joke around the planet.
Okay, what is it?
A man was brought into the rabbi in his small town. The rabbi says to him, Moshe, I couldn't believe what I heard. They tell me they caught you eating on Tzom Gedalia. Is this possible? He says, yeah. He says, you ate on Tzom Gedalia? He says, yeah, and I had 3 good reasons. What are your reasons? Well, first of all, I did a calculation, and by this time the chances are very good Gedalia would have been dead anyway. Number 2, if I died, do you think Gedalia would fast for me? Number 3, Rabbi, I have lunch on Yom Kippur. What are you bothering me about? Okay. Sorry. Okay. The Umi Harago, who killed him, Yishmael ben Netanya Harago, Lilamedcha sheshkula misosa shel tzadikim kisreifas beis Elokeinu. Why is Tzom Gedalia in the thing? All the other fasts have to do with the destruction of the temple, to teach you that the death of the righteous, if a saintly person is murdered, that is an equivalent to the burning of the Beis Hamikdash. That's why he's on the big list. My Korele Shavi. So why do they call it the fast of the 7th? You know the answer to this already. Answer is because it's the 7th
month.
Hello, thank you.
You're welcome.
I knew those peanuts would work. Somo Asiri, and the fast of the 10th. Zeh ato Asara Btevet. This is the 10th of Teves, our friend. Shebo Somach Melech Bovel al Yerushalayim, that is when the king of Babylonia laid siege to Jerusalem. Shenemar, Vayehi Divrei Hashem Elai B'Shana HaTishi'is, and the word of God came to me in the 9th month, B'Chodesh HaAsiri, in the 9th year, in the 10th month, B'Asar L'Chodesh Leimor, on the 10th of that month, saying, Ben Adon, Ksav L'cho Hashem Hayom, Es Etzem Hayom Hazeh Somach Melech Bavel al Yerushalayim. On this very day, the king of Babylonia has laid siege to Jerusalem. So I'll just tell you on a little sidebar. You know why this is remarkable? Because Ezekiel was in Babylonia. The news of the day when Jerusalem was destroyed could not have come to him for something like 2 weeks afterwards. So this would be like getting the news of, the news of the fall of the Tower of Babel while you were living with Indians in Trenton. Right? That's how they knew it was prophecy. Because he told them exactly the day, and then weeks later the messengers arrived and confirmed that exactly when Yechezkel had prophesied the siege to Jerusalem was laid, and that was on Asara Btevet. He says, and wasn't, 1 second, yeah. And if this is the siege, so I'll ask you a wonderful question. You got a siege, you got the breach of the walls, and you have the destruction of the temple. Put them in chronological order. What came first?
Siege.
The siege had to come first. And you didn't even have any peanuts yet. The siege had to come first. So why is the siege the last one mentioned in the pasuk? So he says it's not a big deal. The fasts are arranged in the order of the months. In other words, you wanted 4, 5, 7, 10 in descending order, even though the 10 took place before the other ones. Okay. The Ani Eini Omer came. Rabbi Shimon says, this is Rabbi Akiva's version. I don't agree with him. Because I will tell you, I don't think that the fast of Teves is on the 10th. Tzom ha'asiri ze chamisha b'Teves. That is the 5th of Teves. That is, roughly speaking, Friday. It's going to be the 5th of Teves. 5th of Teves? Did you ever hear the 5th of Teves? Ze chamisha Teves b'Teves shabo bas shemua legola shehuksa ha'yer. Why do we fast on that day? Because that is when the day reached us in Babylonia that the temple had been destroyed.
Made the news.
It made the news. Imagine the ancient world where you didn't have instant communication the way we have today. The major portion of the population was a major Jewish population in Babylonia. The day that the news reached them, they didn't have smoke signals for this. The day the news reached them, to them it was new. To them it was just like it was happening at that moment. And he says, for us, that is the day of the fast. Shenemar, Vayehi. Let's pass it down too. Oh yeah, you have it at the beginning of the, if you turn over to page 2, the pasuk from Yechezkel, the 33rd chapter, and he b'shtei tzrei shana, the Asiri b'chamisha lachodesh, the 12th year, the 10th month, the 5th of the month, the Golusenu, since our exile, you know that the exile to Babylonia came in 2 waves. Go Elai hapalit Yerushalayim leimar. The refugee, the person who escaped, came and brought the news. was all over in Yerushalayim. So we see here that the fasts are all listed in a single sequence, right? The verse upon which fast, let's do our homework here again. Just review this. This is the kind of thing that can slip right by because it's hard to pay attention. Do the numbers here. Which are the fasts? The fast of the 4th month was what?
Shiva
B'Tammuz. Thank you very much. The fast of the 5th month was? Tisha B'Av. The fast of the 7th month was?
Yom Kippur.
Well, no.
Some
Gedalia. You're not going to turn
Oh, it's
Yom
not
Kippur into a different kind of a day. Was Tzom Gedalia, and the fast of the 10th month was
Asara Btevet.
Asara Btevet or Chamisha Btevet, one of the two Teves candidates. So I'll ask you a wonderful question. If this verse is the base for these fast days, it sounds like they are all cut of one cloth. So what was the original character of all of the fast days when they were ordained in the wake of the Churban, of the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem? Was there any difference that you can see from this verse? Any difference in the observance of, let's say, Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av?
Isn't Tisha B'Av somewhat d'oraisa?
Well, they're all
More so than
Divrei
the others.
Kabbalah.
Hmm?
Divrei Kabbalah means they're based on the prophets, and this is the prophet. Divrei Kabbalah has almost the force of Doraisa. It can't be Doraisa because the temple hadn't even been built at the time of the Torah, so it can't have been destroyed. People may find allusions to it, but it can't be part of the original 613. I thought things were feeling rather easy. I've only been doing 316, no wonder. Got about 290 some free passes I've been using. Okay, but so the point is, but if the prophets ordained it after a Torah precept, the next thing is Divrei Kabbalah, is the ordained of the prophet, and they all begin. What I want to just show you here is that all of these fasts came out of the starting gate together. Right? Now everyone here knows 3 of them fell back. In other words, 3 of the 4 ceased to be 24-hour fasts and ceased to be with all of the restrictions that we observe on Tisha B'Av and on Yom Kippur. Right? Once upon a time, Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tzom Gedalia and Asara Btevet, coming out of the same verse as Tisha B'Av, held their own. When did things jiggle a little bit? Apparently when they moved into the period, in some period of Ratzu and Lo Ratzu. What does that mean? When there came a period when they became optional. What did not become optional? The Gemara we read. What never became optional? Tisha B'Av. For some reason, because Huchpelu Hatzaros, whatever that means, that it was a day of repeated agony. Tisha B'Av, in other words, from the time when the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, even when things got better, Tisha B'Av never changed. Even though the prophet Zechariah said that Tisha B'Av would become a day of rejoicing, maybe, the only I'd go is maybe during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was actually up and standing, maybe Tisha B'Av became a happy day. But after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, when we move into this new category of neither perfect peace nor persecution, that sort of blah, the others, their footing got a little shaky. Now, at some point, their footing firmed up, either because the majority of the Jews, or because some Beis Din, or because they simply didn't want Jews observing things differently, and so they decided that everyone had to observe the fasts together. At some point, permission to be lenient was lapsed or was withdrawn, but not from Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av never was subjected to that, according to the Gemara, because of this factor. Now I'd like to show you something you wouldn't even believe it. This is a very interesting kind of a kvetch, because according to our little toggle switch, Rotzu, lo Rotzu, you want to, you don't want to. What should have been the choices? Either what? Well, how did they all start off? All four. Began with Zechariah. All four started off where? This is the audience participation portion of our program. Well, we know they all started off exactly like Tisha B'Av. So what were they all originally? They were all 24-hour fasts with all the restrictions, all the bells and all the whistles. Lo Ratzu, they didn't want to do it. What would they be? What would they be? They'd be Wednesday. They'd be lunch with the ladies at the corner cafe. They'd be nothing. So the question is that all the Rishonim have to ask about it. How did you get to be a little this and a little that? No one ever offered Tisha B'Av light. Right? That wasn't an option. The options were Ratzu, lo Ratzu. At some point, someone opted for Ratzu. But if they opted for Ratzu, we want them. We're going to do them. We should be I don't want to make it, people say Rosenblatt's trying to toughen up the religion. We should be keeping it. And as a matter of fact, the Ramban seems to allude to people who actually did this, who kept all of the Tanesim as if they were Tisha B'Av. Imagine that. So where did we get to this funny business? The minor fasts. Who was it? Santa, you're the one who said none of the fasts are minor? 100%. Who downgraded them? So here there are a number of theories, and I'll show you the one which is explored by the Ritva, and if you're on page 2, see the bottom page says 2, Asara Btevet, who made the minor fast minor? That's the back of the first sheet. And you see it says, how did fasts get minor? You ready with me on that one? Mm-hmm. So the Ritva says, he says, Acha shehurgelu bohem, v'kiblu aleim. Acha shelo hayashmad aleim. Once they accepted these fasts, even when there was no more religious oppression, they accepted it, right? He says, that was it. In other words, the window of opportunity to get rid of these fasts closed. We accepted them. They decided. People said, this is very nice. Those of us on diets, we could use a few days off from food. If you're on a budget, you don't have to feed the kids on Tuesday. It's very nice. Mikol Makom, says the Ritva, introducing a whole new concept. Mikol Makom, Eino Leinu Elo Kumo Sherotzu Horishonim. Somebody voted for me about 1,500 years ago and said, Rotzu, we want it. However, we are limited to what they wanted. And the Ritva goes on, and what they voted to want was only a restriction on eating and drinking. None of the other funny stuff. No PF flyers, no tennis shoes, right? To start the night before? V'lesa b'rechitza nilas asandal, and to tell people they can't wear their shoes. Lo kiblo aleim, that they didn't accept. In other words, what the Ritva is introducing is the only way to understand it is that Rotsu and Lo Rotsu were not all or nothing decisions. You would never know that from the Gemara. He says it was possible there was what we might call the partitive prerogative. Isn't that a lovely phrase? The partitive prerogative, which means you can take the part you want to observe and leave over the other. So it meant that they voted on these tainesim. Listen to this. They voted on them with like a checklist. Which things about this tainus do you want to keep? Do you want to eat and drink? No. Do you want to wear shoes? Heck yeah. You want to start the night before? Oh no. No, we're not doing that again. What? Who is they? So that goes back to the machlokas I said before. Either there was one point at which the Beis Din met and determined, or sometimes, and this is what the Tosfos Harosh would seem to indicate, sometimes the rabbis codify what the people are already doing. In other
Makes
words,
sense.
they see
That
what
makes
has
sense.
been accepted,
Makes sense.
and then they give their legal imprimatur after the fact. I had a history teacher like this in high school. He used to write his lesson plan after class. That way he always accomplished everything he wanted. So the rabbis, it's a good way to get people from, let them do whatever they want, and then say, oh yeah, that's from.
Rabbi Jonathan,
Yes.
weren't the extra chumras, like, besides Achil and Shtia, the other ones, weren't they unique to Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur? I mean, just because of what Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur represented, because of the mourning, because of this, and nothing to do with like deciding on it. It was unique to the day. It was unique to or maybe the rabbis decided, whatever it was. But like, there's sort of like no, there was no like havamina that you would think that maybe you should put the other fasts together with those extra chumas, because it just wasn't applicable. Those extra chumas weren't applicable to those fasts. And
Well, let's
logically.
understand. Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur are very different. Tisha B'Av, Yom Kippur has a pasuk in the Torah, the Nisem Es Nafsho, and the Inui, the setting aside oneself from physical
that was a
pleasure.
deraisa.
That's deraisa. It's a whole different thing, and it's not
And
sad.
Tisha B'Av,
Tisha B'Av, apparently, remember that this is also tied
you
into
said
the
because
way in which certain...
Huchbalu Atzaros.
Well, Huchbalu Atzaros is why Tisha B'Av wasn't downgraded. But remember that when we talk about tinios, we also have to sort of in the back of our mind, keep in mind the various tinios geshonim, the various fasts that were observed when there was a drought, right? And in those fasts, there is already a variety
Okay.
in terms of the stringency.
Okay, so in other words, there was a choice by the other ones.
Apparently,
Yeah,
and
okay.
that's where Rotsu below Rotsu came in.
And that was their own decision, right?
That seems to be either their own or the Beis Din of a
Right,
particular
okay,
time.
fine.
So they either looked at the people and determined what were the people doing, or they
So
looked inside.
the day itself didn't create the extra chumras, like
It's more like, when you talk about Tisha B'Av, the day prevented the chumras from being downgraded.
Okay, fine.
So Tisha B'Av always made people nervous. It's a nervous day, what am I going to tell you? The Sefer Mitzvos, the Smaku is actually, it's actually from the Rabbeinu Peretz, from the Bali HaTosfos, who says something else. He says, on the question of Rotsu and Lo Rotsu, he says, we're not in a period of Rotsu and Lo Rotsu. Why? Because he says, Uvagolus Hashmad Noheg Pe'omim Harbe. Remember, these are people who were living through the Crusades writing this, saying, as once we are in Golus, you cannot be sure at any moment that religious persecution will not reemerge. So either he is saying this is a period of shmad, or he's saying that we are maintaining a certain level because we can never know, we're never secure enough to know that we're out of shmad. It may be a fourth category, actually, the insecurity of goals. Because remember something, people don't even remember this, but I'm going to tell it to you, and you're going to remember it. And if you don't remember it, look it up online, and I'll tell it to you again. Only that won't be me, that'll be the recording, but it's the same thing. After the Second Temple was destroyed, for hundreds of years, there was still a very large population of Jews in the land of Israel. That always comes as a surprise to people. People sort of in their imagination, they think, oh, you destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash and everybody's gone. Well, if they had been gone, they wouldn't have been there to be writing the Mishnah in the next 200 years. So it remained the important center all the way until things tilted to Babylonia in the time after Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. So when he talks about, when Rabbeinu Peretz, commenting on the Smak, says Golus, he's saying that in Eretz Yisrael you can make a clear distinction, Shalom, Shmad, and even Ein Shalom, Ein Shmad, and it's a more or less consistent period. He says, but outside of the land of Israel, in real Golus, the words that he says, if you just imagine the period of the Crusades, are chilling. Hashmad noheg pe'omim harbe. Shmad comes after us again and again, and we don't know always when it's going to be coming. Not just, you just do the connect the dots to the great countries of Europe when they decided to throw the Jews out.
Yeah.
You know, England and France and Spain and Portugal, and we were packing all the time. That's why the Jews invented luggage. What do you think? You think a Gentile invented luggage? They never went anywhere. They were serfs. They lived in the same place. A Jewish person invented a suitcase. It used to be called the Kaplan case. Mr. Suit bought him out early in the day. That was it. And they changed it, but the truth is that's the whole thing. Okay. The Ritva, in the course of an altogether different discussion, is going to give us something that we will, in just a few moments, need as we move toward the end of this. And that is the idea that I reminded you of before. The Ritva says the original obligation established by the Navi. Now it's very important to remember which is Divrei Kabbalah, and it's from the period of the prophets. All it said was the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th. Now, up to now, we've been assuming that when they said that, Bella, they had in mind a particular day. Right? The Ritva says maybe that's not the way it happened. What they said was, a catastrophe befell the Jews in the month of Tammuz. One day in Tammuz, Stanley, you have to fast. You can do it, you know, if it's not convenient for you, invited the wise having fleischiks that day. You know, if it's not convenient, all right, you do it the next day when they have those fish croquettes. Responsible for the early demise of at least 5 ladies that we know about just last week. So you can postpone.
Why would they send out the shtuchim?
That for Tisha B'Av, it's a good kasha. Why did they send out?
Yeah, if you could do it on any day.
That's taka good kasha. However, they said even if they did it on a particular day, even if they had in mind another day, it means there was tashlum. If you couldn't do that day, you could do it on another day. That's the Minchas Chinuch's approach to that question. But you ask a very good question when it comes to the Tisha B'Av. Enter the Abu Dhram. The Abu Dhram was a Spanish scholar who commented on the liturgy, the laws relating to liturgy. He was like the great, great, great ancestor of Rabbi Artscroll. So it's called the Abu Dram. There was never an RCA edition of the Abu Dram. There was never. By the time Rabbi Artscroll came in, the marketing was much better and everything. But the Abu Dram comes in for a bit of an attack. Of course, this made him very famous because there were very few people who had an Abu Dram, but plenty of people had a Beis Yosef. What was the Beis Yosef? The Beis Yosef was the running comments of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, which he wrote on the Tur code which preceded him, and you get the preview of all the things he's going to put in the Shulchan Aruch there. And he mentions a position taken by the Abu Dram. He says, "V'harav David Abu Dram kosa bechos tainis she'asara b'teves hu meshuna mishar tainios." Asara Btevet is like no other tainis. It is unique. Why? She'im hoya chol b'Shabbos. That if Asara Btevet fell on Shabbos, lo hayu yicholim lichoso layom acher. You wouldn't push it to another day. Right? What do we do when any of the other Tanaisim, including Tisha B'Av, fall on Shabbos?
Nidche.
Nidche. We push it off to the next day.
Which is this coming next, the next one.
The next one is
Next
day. Asara B'Tevet. It doesn't come out this way in our calendar, but he says it has the power that if it did, you would have to fast on Shabbos.
But we do fast on Fridays, and we don't, there's no
Asara
other.
B'Tevet is the only one that can fall
That
on
can fall on
Friday,
Friday,
and
yeah.
it's probably
I think
related
last
to
year it
this. Good. Is even a question there. What happens if you start Shabbos early? Are you allowed to end the tiniest early?
Oh, I
There's a
see.
lot of discussion about that Friday Asara B'Tevet. But the Abu Dram, he went for broke, because he says, forget about Friday. I'm telling you, the Asara B'Tevet, you'd have to fast on Shabbos. Now he says this.
Ah,
He says this. The Beis Yosef quotes this, and everything goes quiet. Everybody goes into an immediate shock, right? And he explains why, and he says, "Mipnei shenemar bo," because the verse which is associated with this. Now you learned this already. You didn't even notice it because it uses a unique phrase. The verse from Yechezkel. You can see it on the bottom of page 1. Right? It says, "V'hipar Hashem elad b'shana tshis b'chodesh hasir v'yasor chodesh leimor ben adam tzav lecha es shem hayom." Note this day, es etzem hayom hazeh, this very day, samach melech Babel al Yerushalayim be'etzem hayom hazeh. The king of Babylonia besieged Jerusalem on this very day. Says, we're still quoting the Abu Dram, be'etzem hayom hazeh, on this very day, kemo yom HaKippurim. Yom HaKippurim is also called etzem. And therefore, so in other words, according to the Abu Dram,
You would start the night before.
what?
You would start the night before.
Not necessarily the night before, interesting. He's not saying it's like Yom Kippur in its way. He's not even saying it's like Yom Kippur in having to observe all of the Inuyim. He's simply saying that in this sense, it is Be'etzem Hayom, it must be on that very day. No one pushes off Yom Kippur. And the use of this phrase, Be'etzem, from the prophet Ezekiel. In other words, from the prophet Zechariah, who says the fast of the 10th month. So maybe, as I gave Stanley permission, you could slip it and slide it around, like the Ritva says. Says the Abu Dram, that applies to everything except Asara Btevet. Because Asara Btevet comes with a set of breaks. The set of breaks are the pasuk from the prophet Yechezkel, who describes this day not as the fast of the 10th month, but this very day, it and none other. Better be the right day on the very day. Says the Abudram, even if that day is Shabbos. And the Beis Yosef says, V'lo yodati minayin lo zeh. I have no idea where he came up with this. He has no clue. Now it's interesting. All you have to do, if you're the Beis Yosef, anybody here ever study advanced mathematics? You know how in advanced mathematics they have those famous riddles or questions that like generations try to answer?
Unsolvables.
What'd you say?
Unsolvables.
Unsolvables are famous. They're named after somebody, so-and-so's quotient or theorem or whatever it is. When the Beis Yosef says the words, Lo yodati minayin lo zeh, I don't know where he got that. That is like a gun going off at the New York Marathon. Because it means if you're anybody, you want to answer the Beis Yosef's question of how the Abudram got his idea. Now the one of the first people to swing a bat at the Abudram's question was Tzipporah's grandfather's grandfather, Reb Chaim Brisker. And Reb Chaim says as follows, yes, you may cheer for the local team, feel no, it's very fine. He says, where does he get this idea of Asara Btevet? And he has a brilliant concept. And he says, the answer to this question, so you take the second paragraph on the third page. He says, Hinei tainis chalom nis'anin afilu b'Shabbos. There is one fast day that you can do even on Shabbos. I don't want to tell you this because I don't want to make you nervous, but if you have a really, really terrible dream on Friday night, lo aleinu v'lo aleichem, like a terrible, terrible dream, right? And you wake up in the morning, you're in a cold sweat and you're upset, right? The appropriate thing to do, if you're really concerned that this dream is an omen of something terrible, you can fast the rest of Shabbos. Wow. A tiny chalom. And a tiny chalom, you can even, a dream fast, you can even do on Shabbos. It says it's a very interesting idea. V'chazina mizeh, says Reb Chaim, we see from this, the shaykh tainis b'Shabbos, that conceptually, there are, aside from Yom Kippur, which is biblical, that it is possible that there is a fast which can override the Shabbos. Normally speaking, other fasts, like if Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos, you push it off because you can fast the next day. So why fast on Shabbos if you don't have to? If there were for some reason why the fast specifically had to be on Shabbos, the aim, and it was, you couldn't move it. Like a tainis chalom, you can't say, I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a tainis today. You cannot just, you have to do it the day you wake up with the bad dream. In such a case, then you could. Good. It's better to do it the very day. Don't push it off. So we do on Shabbos. And that's why Asara Btevet is unique. Right? He's making use of the principle that I taught you before. He says the verse in the Torah, in the prophet simply says it has to be, it's connected to the month. So if it's not, if it isn't today, if it's not today, which is Shabbos, so the next day also be this month. Right? This very day. That means it has to be that day. It is not immovable. It is one that has to be just then and then. And so therefore, Asara Btevet, according to our friend, the Abu Dram, that's where he got his idea. So now, Porah's grandfather's grandfather has, the Beis Yosef says he has no idea. Reb Chaim just answered his question. However, there is an essay by Dayan Baruch Chaim Halevi Dunner, who was a wonderful, fine Talmud Chacham at Gateshead. And he does a review article, and he says he doesn't really buy Reb Chaim. The reason he doesn't buy Reb Chaim is because a tiny chalom is a very different kind of a creature. He thinks the comparison is invidious for two reasons. First of all, he says a tiny chalom, when a person is so upset, fasting is pleasurable. In other words, to be forced to eat when you're so filled with anxiety, that would be more troubling. And the fact that you are allowed to indulge and fast on Shabbos actually gives you a sense of relief. Because you know, when you're very upset, if you eat anything, you're going to throw up. Right? So therefore, if you're so upset from your dreams, so we let you not eat, and you're very relieved. You're a delighted person. Not thrilled you're not, because you still had a bad dream, but you're happier than you would have been. The same dream on the other side of a cholent would be a triple nightmare. The second thing that he says is, a tanis chalom is no great mitzvah. Because the law is, if you do find yourself fasting on Shabbos because of a bad dream, you have to fast another day for having dishonored the Shabbos by fasting. It's called tanis l'taniso.
You made that up.
I wish I had.
We were all thinking that.
No one can say Jewish law is without its charm. No, it's the thing, because you have to do it because it's Shabbos, but you make a recognition that to injure the spirit of Shabbos is not a light thing. It's not a small thing. So he's not thrilled with Reb Chaim's approach, usually in Tanis Chalom, but he has another approach which is very interesting. And his approach is that how the fasts actually came into being along the way. And he tells us that the fasts were initially, put in by the prophets in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash. There's just one problem with being a prophet. You know what's going to happen. So he says when the Navi, Zechariah, said, it'll be a day of joy and gladness, he knew, but that after that, there would be another destruction. And after the joy and gladness, there would be more sorrow. And so, the original Gzeira was, we are going to establish a tainus that is of the month. It's a tainus, like we read it in the Pasuk. It's keyed to each of the key months. However, we are leaving a dispensation that in the event that the second Beis Hamikdash will also be destroyed, the rabbis who will follow that, it will be up to them to establish when it is that the fast is to take place. So, he says, that the establishments of the dates of the fasts, which come after the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash, he says, at that point they are fixed to specific dates. But in the fixing of the dates, they still hearken back to the fact that one of them had been fixed from before. The one that had been fixed from before was Asara Btevet, because in addition to the verse from Zechariah, it had the verse from Yechezkel. So, that one day has the standing of the original prophetic institution. The others that were established later, and that's why Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon are still fighting over which day in Tammuz. Can you imagine? This is so late. This is 100 years after the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva can't decide whether Shivasar B'Tammuz should be on the 17th or on the 9th. And Rabbi Shimon, in effect, is saying we do it on the day that the first Beis HaMikdash was, when Jerusalem was breached the first time. And Rabbi Akiva comes along and says, no, it was left open. We're going to all observe it on the day when the Beis HaMikdash, when the walls of Jerusalem were breached on the second time. So it was only latterly that everything was completely fixed. However, what does this mean? It means that the fixing of the date, the Etzem Hayom Hahu, places Asar B'Teves on the same level as the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos, which is also Divrei Kabbalah. In other words, the obligation to enjoy the Shabbos is Divrei Kabbalah, and now it places Be'etzem Hayom Hahu on the same level, and that's why it has the possibility that it can push off the Shabbos. The other ones, whose Divrei Kabbalah only, in other words, their original foundation is only of the month, they're fixing on the date, it is authoritative, but it only has the impact of rabbinic legislation. A rabbinic thing cannot push off something which is Divrei Kabbalah. So it has a different set of credentials. All of the days are now fixed by rabbinic convention at least, but the substratum, the Divrei Kabbalah, covers the month of all of them and the date of one of them, Asara Btevet. So what you are experiencing here is that Asara Btevet, because of that Be'etzem Hayom, it's fundamentally the idea of the Brisker Rav, but of Rav Chaim, but a little bit different from Rav Dunner. Rav Dunner explains the reason it has nothing to do with Tainis Chalom. It has to do with the idea that this Divrei Kabbalah comes from the same period as the whole idea of Oneg Shabbos, and therefore it has this great power. But now I would like to send you away with some dessert. Up to this point, this has all been halachic categories. What's the greatness of Asara Btevet? And this is intended so the next Thursday, even when you're not eating, you should have a little bit of comfort and a little bit of smile. It's a Midrash Tanchuma, the last thing you have there. It says, "Tzedakah osa v'osa gola sheshaka b'level." That even in the process of exile and destruction, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was thinking of us with kindness. Ketzad? What kindness? B'teves haya ru'uyim ligolos miYerushalayim. We were supposed to be exiled in Teves. This was supposed to be the month of the destruction and of the exile. Shekenu Omer ben Adam ksov lecha es Hashem hayom. Etzem hayom hazeh. The Etzem hayom hazeh was supposed to be the day, the big day of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Ma osa HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What did God do? Omar im yotzim achshav b'tzina. If I send them out now in the cold, because Teves is when the winter is beginning to grip the land of Israel. If I exile them in the cold, hey Mason, they'll die of the cold, of exposure. Ma also lahem him tin lahem bekayitz v'yiglosam. He waited until the summer. He postponed he postponed the exile, the destruction, until the summer, because even when he was punishing his people, he couldn't bear the idea of their suffering in the cold. I'll tell you a very important story to finish, just to illustrate this point. They told the story of a young fellow, yeshiva bacher, who came to the yeshiva in Radin. Now, we've been taught idealized fake history, but the truth of the matter is that in Eastern Europe in that time, the ideas of the Haskalah and worse had penetrated everywhere. And there were many young people who were very much influenced by ideas which the sages of the generation saw as dangerous and forbidden. And the Chafetz Chaim interviewed this fellow and realized that this guy, he was not the stuff of which a yeshiva bacher should be fashioned. And the Chafetz Chaim turned him down and said, I can't accept you in yeshiva. However, in those days, travel was difficult. If you had a few dollars or kopecks or whatever you had, you went by train, but there weren't so many trains. And so this fellow had no choice but to spend the night in Radin. Where did he sleep? He slept in the loft in the Chafetz Chaim's barn. Late, middle of the night, the guy hears someone coming up the ladder. Who's coming up the ladder? It's the Chafetz Chaim himself. And he's bringing the warm comforter from his own bed and bringing it to this young man. And the young man says, Rebbe, I don't understand. You just told me, you just rejected me from your yeshiva. Chafetz Chaim says, true, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. And it doesn't mean I want you to be cold. And he said of that young man, true, he did become a maskil, but you could never get him to say a word against the Chafetz Chaim, because he remembered the elemental kindness. I would be very surprised if the Chafetz Chaim did not have this Midrash Tanchuma in mind as he walked up that ladder. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how angry did the Almighty have to be to bring destruction on his people? And with all that, he said, you know what? Okay, but not in the cold. So next Thursday, when we're all fasting and feeling sorry for ourselves, just remember that this is the day when our Father loved us so much that even at the height of his anger, he couldn't bear to turn us out into the cold. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you. Thank you. Rita?
So much.